Okay, this is Brian. I am back. I am alive. It is Sunday morning, and I am still studying. Okay, here we go. Just had a good breakfast, and I'm going to be pulling up the PowerPoint for obesity. Obesity affects us all, and if you're not going through it, you know somebody who is. So, this is a very important topic, and I think you will all enjoy getting to know a little bit more about it. So let's go to the PowerPoints. Obesity 2013. Okay, so besides fat storage, what does adipose tissue do? We have to know that when we're making this adipose tissue, we're creating something more than just fat storage. We have metabolically active tissue. And this tissue is going to secrete hormones. For example, adiponectin, which is good. It helps with insulin sensitivity and also weight control. And there's also the other hormone, leptin, which is also good. Leptin is a long-term weight regulation hormone, so it will produce satiety and keep you feeling full enough to prevent too much body fat. It regulates body fat. It also regulates fertility, and I think that's where the sleep and weight intersect. Leptin regulates fertility, puberty. Okay, and there's also secretions of fatty acids by adipose tissue, as well as cytokines and chemokines. Now, we have to keep in mind 35.7% of Americans are obese, not just overweight. I'm going to go through the different classifications. Obese is having a BMI greater than 40. Now, BMI, I'll admit to you right away, is not the only important factor when you're looking at somebody's health in terms of their weight. Okay, there are other factors that I'm going to talk about. We start with that. That's how the classifications are set right now. So BMI greater than or equal to 40 means you're obese. And that's 35.7% of the American population. Now, underweight is less than 18.5. Less than or equal to 18.5. Greater than 18.5 up to 25 is what you want to hope for. Okay, that's the BMI normal. Overweight is above 25 up to 30. Okay, so it's really up to 29.9. At 30, you're overweight. 30 BMI, you're classified as overweight. 30 to 35 is obesity 1, and then I think that's where we're talking about. It's not just the over 40 you're obese. Over 40 you're severely obese, right? Extreme obesity. But 35 to 39 is obese 2, and then there's obese 1, 30 to 35. Okay. Now remember, 29.9 to 25 is still overweight. So that's the 35.7 doesn't include the overweight people. So that's even more people if you're talking about overweight and up. Okay. Weight classification. We have to keep in mind that males should have less body fat than females. So if you're greater than 25 as a male, you're classified as obese with these BMI weight, the BMI classifications, and combine that with the obesity body fat classification. For females, your body weight, your body fat percentage should be no more than 33%. Otherwise, you're classified as obese. BMI, which we know is just kilograms over meters squared, in conjunction with waist circumference, is used to identify disease risk. And when overweight and above, what circumference are you at disease risk? Well, for men, it's 40 inches or 102 centimeters for your waist. Okay. Women, it's 35 inches. Okay. In this case, women have a lower number. They should not have as much abdominal fat, so they have a lower number. Before we were talking about them having a higher limit because, yes, women have body fat in their breasts, in their legs, and they should have more than men. However, we're talking about here with the waist, abdominal fat. So women should not have more than 88 centimeters and should not be, and this is the same as saying no more than size 35 in terms of inches for the waist. And waist circumference is actually a better predictor than BMI for diabetes, chronic heart disease, and mortality. Waist to hip ratio. Okay. This evaluates disease risk. Okay. Very well. And it gives you body fat distribution. Waist to hip ratio. Okay. So it's a ratio. It's going to be less than 1. Okay. What men, we say, should be they should not be more than 0.95. When we're talking about waist to hip, we're talking about waist on the top, hip on the bottom. So disease risks increase when men are greater than 0.95, so that waist is really measuring that abdominal fat. The hip is more of a bone structure issue, but when you're talking about the waist, you're measuring the abdominal fat. Now, I heard it's not easy to get a good measurement for this, but just know that men should have a waist-hip ratio of less than 0.95 if they don't want to have increased disease risk, and women should have a waist-hip ratio of 0.8 if they don't want to have increased disease risk. Okay. So there was a study done in 2006 in the N. Haynes survey, And it showed for those with a BMI 18.5 to 24.9, this is the normal people, 14% of women had a high waist circumference. So there's only 1% of the men. Now, for those with a BMI 25 to 29, remember that's the overweight category. 70% of women had a high waist circumference. Waist, remember waist. Waist up here. Okay. When we talk about pant size, it's really the hip. Okay. We're talking about waist. Okay. So 70% of women with a BMI of 25 to 29 had a high waist circumference, which is meaning they have an increased risk for disease. And we talked about those diseases. We said diabetes, chronic heart disease, and mortality. 25% of men had a high waist circumference. Okay, with a BMI of 25 to 29. But disproportionately, you could see women had that high waist circumference, and that's dangerous. Okay, obesity. When you get to a BMI of 25 to 34.9, there is hypertrophy. Okay, hypertrophy. That means the body cells are expanding. Okay. Now, hyperplasia, which has to do with the cell number, that increases with a BMI over the extreme severe obesity, over 40. Now, that is important because many people consider that the point of no return with normal dietary intervention. Okay? You have to be careful with kids, especially because that is going to be very difficult for them to overcome when their BMI is over 40, now that they have all these fat cells that have divided and multiplied. Okay. Divided and multiplied. That's really what happens. Okay. Obesity, why does it happen? Okay, there is definitely a genetic predisposition to obesity. Certain people will have taste receptors in their mouth that make them dislike vegetables. They have the phenylalanine taste receptor, which is a receptor for bitterness. So they will really be disinclined and disenchanted with vegetables. Okay, so how does genetics play a role? We talked about taste preferences. Also, people are born with different appetites. People are born with different thermic effect of food, meaning when they're breaking down the food, certain people use more calories to break down the food. Okay? And that is actually a good thing when you're using calories to break up the food. Okay, resting energy expenditure. Resting energy expenditure. That has to do with how many calories you're burning and while you're not doing anything. Some people have a higher resting energy expenditure. Some people say, all I have to do is look at food and I'm gaining weight. And to some extent, that is true. They have a disadvantage with their metabolism. And they are not going to burn calories while looking at the food the same way that other people, you don't have to necessarily be looking at food, just not eating food. They're burning calories at a more efficient rate and are not building up calories at a more efficient rate. Others have a high energy storage efficiency, and that is disadvantage when you're talking about being predisposed to obesity.